So hey there fellow YouTubers, Frank Bush here again. So in today's video, I had the good people over at ALLPOWERS decided they were going to send me over this flexible solar panel here. So I'm going to do a review on that for them and kind of see what the performance is and that kind of stuff before I go taking it out into the field, yeah? So like I say, this is the ALLPOWERS SF200 monocrystalline flexible solar panel. And it's 200 watts, yeah? So if you're interested in kind of seeing the performance of this and that kind of thing, stay tuned. Okay, so for the first order business things, I'll just do an unboxing of, the shipping that it came in and kind of give you guys a quick glance at that, show you the quality that it comes shipped, and then we'll get into some testing of this thing in a few different scenarios. Hopefully I'll be able to do it with some batteries, without some batteries, using this in kind of flexible, versatile ways, like I would use out in the field, yeah? So we'll do real world testing of this, see how it performs. Alright, so first order business, I just slid it with my pocket knife to open the side and just slide it out because I know there's not much to it, but we'll just kind of see what it looks for itself on the inside, yes? Hopefully I'm catching this on camera okay. I know when you're trying to do videos about solar panels, it always gets tricky just because they're big, right? But one way or the other, it comes with some MC4 to Anderson connections, and it's got a bunch of Velcro straps, so that's always nice to have, kind of extra wires in the mix. And then I'll just pop this off. Now I'm not going to keep this exposed to the sun until I have it plugged in and stuff, but I'll just quickly do this to show you, yeah? So there's MC4 connections that connect on for the solar panel. I like the packaging, it's got a protective kind of foam packaging here, and I'll just slide that off. And it's really like a little, almost like a case that the solar panel sits into, yeah? So I like that. And I'll start to talk about some of the details of the panel itself. But, the packaging seems good quality. It's nice to see that they protected it with some foam and that kind of stuff. And as it goes for the build quality, there's some specs on the back of the panel and that kind of thing. I'll read through those as we go through the video, just to kind of give you all the specific details, on exactly how it performs. And then, like I say, I'm going to do some 12 volts testing, and I'll plug it into a solar charge controller and see what its performance is, how many amps it's putting out and that kind of thing. And we'll do a few varied tests of, like I say, how I would use this when I was out in the field. Hopefully I'll be able to cook off some lunch just using this panel. So I do want to do some examples with batteries and without, and really cover, like I say, real world use, yeah? So let me just adjust things. I'll set this down, but as it goes for the packaging, it seems pretty good quality, and I'll come in on the specs and give you the details of that early on in the video before I go into the examples, yeah? Okay, so I just put the solar panel up against the fence to keep it out of the sunlight for now, and like I say, I'll just show you the specs it's got on the back. I'm kind of free holding the camera, so if it's a little bit shaky, forgive me, but it's a monocrystalline silicon ETFE solar panel. So the ETFE, there's kind of two main types of these flexible panels. They use either PET or ETFE, and the ETFE is the better one. It lasts longer, it doesn't cloud as much, on the plastic surface we're talking now. When the sun's exposed to these panels, especially with the flexible ones, when the sun's exposed to these panels over a couple of years, the PET or PET plastics will kind of cloud and scratch easier and that kind of stuff. The ETFE is just clearer, better quality, lasts longer, more thermal resistant, all that kind of happiness, yeah? But they give a maximum output here of 200 watts with an open voltage of 38.4 volts. Short circuit current is 6.87 amps. Maximum output voltage 32 volt. Maximum output current 6.25 amps. The maximum system voltage is 120 volts. So when they're talking 120 volts here, that's for when you're connecting them together in series. You don't want to go above 120 volts as the combined voltage, or you can end up frying out these solar panels, yeah? So you can connect a few of them together. That's what, 3 or 4 panels you can hook in series, and then you don't really want to go beyond that without it causing real grief, right? So the maximum conversion rate is pretty efficient. We're looking at 22 to 25%. So in my mind, that's pretty high efficiency when it comes to solar panels. Generally, a lot of them are anywhere from 19 to 23, you know, that kind of thing. So this is pushing up to the higher end. I mean, we'll see when we do the real world testing of it, how it really performs, right? But it's got a water resistance of an IP68, so, you know, it's good and waterproof and all that kind of stuff. The height is 1,375 millimeters, so 54.13 inches. The width, 780 millimeters, which is 30.7 inches. The thickness is, you know, 3 millimeters, which is about 1/10 of an inch. And the weight of it is 4.1 kilograms, so 9.03 pounds. So, you know, as it goes for the amount of power this will perform, you know, to have it at less than 10 pounds, that's pretty good, really, in my mind. So, like I say, I'll go grab some gear now from the house, and we'll start to do some testing on this to see how the panel performs at being able to do kind of basic functions, yeah? Okay, so I just shifted the solar panel now into the shadows, and that way I can start to wire things up where I'm not having to deal with it fully working while I'm doing it, right? So I've got the MC4 connections that come off of the solar panel here, and it's actually really handy. They've got these little Velcro bands that they use to kind of help keep it in a spool and that kind of stuff. So, you know, nice little details like that. But needless to say, I've got my MC4 connections here, you know, just standard stuff, if you will. And then I've shown this in previous videos, but when I go out into the field, if I want to kind of bring this panel with me, but I don't want to have batteries with me, I just want to run a batteryless system and kind of just run when the sun's running, I'm running, and when the sun's out, I have no power production. Now, I have this little unit. Now, this is a buck converter, and with this buck converter, it's got an inline fuse to it just to kind of, you know, safety first, if you will. Normally with any type of DC wiring, you want to have fuses in your lines, yeah? But it simply connects off to those MC4 connections that are coming off the solar panel. And I've got it where I can feed my solar panel directly into this, and then I'll just set this part down, but the output of this through that fuse then comes along to just a little cigarette lighter adapter. Now, I use a lot of cigarette lighter adapter stuff when I'm out in the field, like little USB chargers and 12-volt cooking utensils and, you know, pots and pans and that kind of stuff, yeah? So I find having just this basic setup is really excellent at me being able to kind of do 90% of what I want to do when I'm out in the field and not have to worry about having batteries, right? So one way or the other, I'll just plug in now I'll just shift you down a little tiny bit. I'll just take the MC4 connections that are coming right off the solar panels, and I'm going to connect those directly to, it's just male to female. I want to make sure that's connected until I hear it click. Lets me know there's a good connection in there. And the same here, you know, take the male, put it into the female. You'll hear that click. That lets me know I'm connected, and it's just that simple now. To the point where this 12-volt cigarette lighter adapter will have power as soon as I put these solar panels out in the sun, yeah? So what I'm going to do is, I've got an immersion heater as well here. And if you watch lots of previous videos of mine, I always like having a coffee on the go. So I've got a little 12-volt immersion heater. I can plug this directly into that cigarette lighter adapter, and this little element will heat up, and I can put it right into a coffee cup and heat up some water. So we'll see, normally, historically speaking, if I'm getting full power into this, I can have a hot cup of coffee in about 10 minutes. So we'll test that with the solar panel as just kind of primitive in the field use to see if it'll easily do that job, you know, with direct sun on it, yeah? So like I say, I'll go grab a coffee cup and some water and get ready to make myself a coffee. Okay, so I've just turned around and thrown the solar panel into the sunlight. And like I say, I'm now running, this will be 12-volt active now. As long as there's sunlight shining on that panel, we're Gucci that way. I went in and just grabbed my coffee cup, you know, third one today, if you will. But grab my coffee cup. Now I'm just gonna plug that in, and this should immediately start getting hot. And it is. I can feel the temperature rising on this. It's already too hot to touch just that quickly. But I'm gonna turn around and put this down. I don't know if you heard that sizzle, but I'm gonna just put this down into the water that I have here just to bring it up to temperature, yeah? And I'll quickly just stop and switch camera angles. I'll show you this up close, and I'll tell you exactly what time it is. Just give me 20 seconds. All right, well, I try to be as quick as I can here. Let me see what I just forgot my cell phone. So I got 1 o'clock on the cell phone. So, 12:59, 1 o'clock. And, within reason. As you can see, this is a really, really simple setup though. I just got the solar panel going out to the buck converter, goes through a fuse and straight off to the 12 volt where, I can plug in any 12 volt device and start to use it when I'm out in the field. Like I say, this is probably one of my most simple yet effective levels of being able to do stuff, where I can boil off a bit of water if I need to. I can cook using 12 volts. I'll probably throw a can of soup into the pot and just let the solar panel do its magic that way. And then like I say, later on in the video, I'll hook it up to a solar charge controller and show you the performance. But we'll just see how it works in real world without checking numbers and reading specs and all that kind of stuff. Does it do the job that I want it to do with ease, right? That's the key factor here. So like I say, I'll cut back in a few minutes and we'll see how well this water's coming along. Yeah, so I thought while the water's kind of coming up to temperature, I'll just quickly stop and show you a good look at this solar panel. And I mean, there's not much to see. There's not a lot of moving parts when it comes to solar panels, but to give you an idea, this is a monocrystalline panel, so that's normally, they tend to be the most efficient when it comes to the different types of crystalline structures that they use within solar panels. So they're using the best of those ones, when it's an IP68, so it's waterproof and all that happiness. One of the key things is that ETFE material, the plastic coating that they put on it. It gives there's not a lot of high glare comes off it like you get off of glass. So if you were attaching this to like a teardrop or trailer and that kind of stuff, or you were putting it on a place where it's going to get a lot of reflective light, it's very, very little reflection. Here, I'll see if I can just shift camera angles and show you the level of reflection that comes off of it. Really isn't that bad. It's fairly muted, so it's good in that regard. And it's got the black backing and stuff to help kind of limit all that kind of stuff. And then I'll come in close if I can and just show they've got these steel rings, and now they supplied a bag with a bunch of Velcro straps where you can just strap this onto things, with ease, where they've got 4 down each side of these kind of oblong ring shapes, these stainless steel rings that you can hook into. So when it comes to, if you wanted to put it up as temporary setups to things and that kind of stuff, it seems fairly easy to do all that kind of business. And the ETFE is really good in the regards of its thermal resistance. When you're dealing with black panels sitting out in the sun, they get hot, right? So depending on the plastics you're using, it can have high impact. But all in all, this seems like a really good flexible solar panel when I'm looking at the quality of it and all that kind of stuff. I'll show you the actual cells themselves and see if I can get in on that justifiably. They got little bubbles on it too, where if you're on an angle, those little plastic bubbles, if you will, that sit on the surface of it help direct light into the cell better and that kind of stuff. But they've got a bunch of marketing material on the details of that. But one way or the other, I know we're not going to have too much longer for that water, so I'll cut back over to that as the next scene and we'll kind of see where it's at, and I'll give you the time of it. Okay, well, we're at 1:07 at this point in time, so now we're getting close to 10 minutes. But I can see, just figured I'd show this in the camera. I don't know if the camera's picking it up justifiably, but I'm seeing a significant amount of bubbles coming off my immersion heater. So it seems to be producing well when it comes to, how much power it's throwing as heat into there. Right now, we're sitting at 58, 59 Celsius. So that's 138, give or take, 135, 138 Fahrenheit. So I don't normally have my coffee too much hotter than that, to be honest. I find if I go above about 65, that's about the extent that I like to go with it. So like I say, 57, we got 62.8, so it's definitely coming up into temperature. At this point in time, I'll just do my old faithful pinky test. Yeah, I can keep my pinky in there. So normally that's my test if it's hot enough. If I can't keep my pinky in there, it needs more heat, right? But like I say, we managed to get that water. That was ice cold out of my tap. There wasn't any preheating or any of that business. And managed to get that in about 8-9 minutes, where I could easily be having a hot cup of coffee at this point in time. give you an idea of kind of the ease of performance when it comes to this. You know, first thing in the morning, as long as you got a sunny day, this can be invaluable without having to stop and burn any fuel or any of that kind of stuff, just to be able to do this with ease, you know. But I'll cut back in 2 minutes and show you the exact temperature where it reaches in 10-minute period. Yeah. Okay, well, hopefully you see that on the phone here of 110. So we're at the 10-minute mark, and I'll just bust out my little digital thermometer again and see exactly where we're at for that. So 64, so for 146 Fahrenheit. So that's easily able to have yourself a hot coffee. And like I say, I'm right at the edge where I can keep my pinky in that. I can leave it in for maybe 10 seconds tops. So one way or the other, that's performing as expected. The good part about even seeing this level of productivity is I know any type of 12-volt cooking device that plugs into a cigarette lighter, I can now run with confidence just with the kit that I have set up here, yeah? So one way or the other, we'll shift gears though, and we'll start to show a few more examples. So now, like I say, I just unplugged the immersion heater that I was using. You know, like I say, it's all just cigarette lighter adapter stuff here. So I just unplugged that. I've got my coffee here, and it's just the way I like it. I even had to dump a little out, just add a bit of milk because I wanted it a little cooler. It's kind of warm today. But I also wanted to show you too, like I say, once you're into these cigarette lighter adapters, and this solar panel is easily able to handle this load, right? And there's no complication in that regard. But I'm just going to plug in this little unit, and let me throw my old man eyes on. Hold on. So this has a 1 amp on the top and a 2.1 amp on the bottom USB. So it's easy enough for me, without really having much additional gear, to be able to charge devices, right? So I just got a USB plug, and that feeds off to just a little USB-C connection. That plugs right into my phone, you know, as you normally would have. And you can see, hopefully the camera caught that. I'm taking a charge, right? I'm at 96%, so it's going to take the charge pretty quick, but about 10 minutes till I'm fully charged. So even with this basic setup using this solar panel, it's producing enough where I could easily turn around and be charging tablets, phones, you know, other devices, battery banks, and all that kind of stuff if I wanted to run lighting systems in the evening. Instead of bringing along a huge lithium iron phosphate battery or any of that business, I can easily bring along a battery bank and have it that it just charged off of this, and I just use this to power all the stuff like I'm showing in the example in the daytimes. Without having a big battery, I'm cooking food, I'm able to boil water and that kind of stuff, charging up my devices, so that in the evening when I just want to run lights, you know, sitting by a campfire or something, I just want to run lights, it's easy enough for me to just have battery banks, the little ones that you can kind of, you know, carry with you in a bag and that kind of stuff. It makes it really easy for conveyance purposes, you know, being able to move through the woods, you know, with gear, if you will, right? But this panel really seems to be performing, I don't know, as expected. It's when it comes to these cigarette light adapters, normally they won't draw any more than about 120 to 150 watts max. So this panel, you know, when it comes to solar panels, they don't normally put out, even though this is rated for 200 watts, you'll be lucky if you get 75-80% of that, generally speaking, for the actual power output. So, but even at 75%, if you will, of what it's rated at, that would still be 175 watts, and it would be well more than enough to run anything that I want to run off this, as long as I'm getting direct sunlight, yeah? That's the only kind of weakness to using systems where you're not running any batteries at all, where I'm just using buck converters and stuff. If the sun's not shining, you're not producing nearly as much. It's just that simple, right? I might be able to run charging my USB, because that doesn't really pull a lot of power, but unless there's direct full sunlight, I'm not going to be able to cook food and boil water like I've shown. You can only do that, you know, when you've got good conditions where sun is directly shining on those panels, right? So one way or the other, I'll shift gears now, and I'll just get my lunch on the go doing this as well, because we've got a bit of time before the sun leaves my backyard. So I'll show an example of using another 12-volt item where I can cook using this with no battery involved, and then I'll switch over and show you plugging into like a battery-based system and all that kind of stuff, yeah? All right, so now I just kind of shift camera angles so I hopefully keep things in the sun a bit, just so you guys can get better lighting on what I'm doing here now that I'm backlit, if you will. So I've just got this, a little 12-volt pot, and it plugs into the cigarette lighter adapter as well and has its own fuse in line, you know, and it's really simple to use. I turn around and take that cigarette lighter adapter coming off the solar panels, just plug that straight in, and then hopefully the camera's picking this up. See, should see, I know the sun's like right where it would be. You'll see a green light flash in there, lets me know that it's on. And it's one of those things where this pot now is taking heat. Yeah, it's already starting to get warm on the inside, and that's purely being driven off of that solar panel. There's nothing else, right? So I'll just use a can opener. Now, in the last couple times I've done these kinds of videos, I had beef and barley was a running theme for a couple videos, but this time I'm going to go with some chunky beef stew, and I got one of the bigger cans, so, you know, not being chintzy when it comes to how much food I want to cook or any of that. But I'll just pop this open and throw it into the can so it gets going. And generally speaking, what I found is anywhere from about half an hour to 45 minutes, and I'll end up having a hot meal, you know, of canned food. Take a little longer if you're cooking stuff from raw and that kind of stuff, but to me, one of the key parts is, can this solar panel do this without a battery involved? That to me is a critical thing. If I want to travel light and I've got a lot of gear in the truck and stuff, and I just want to turn around and throw this onto the top of, say, my truck cap, you know, the back on the truck there. I just want to throw that solar panel up there so it's kind of low key, but run this in through the windows and cook in the back of my truck and that kind of thing. I can do that without having to get a bunch of batteries involved, right? And I can see that that light is still going solid, so I have no concerns in that regard of this thing should just be cooking away. I'll see if I can even prop something up on the back of the solar panel just so it's aimed, you know, more directly at the sun, if you will. You don't normally want to have solar panels just sitting flat. You want to have them angled up on roughly a 45-degree angle so that they're facing the sun as much as possible. You get better performance that way, yeah? So let me just see if I can find an item to kind of do that. So you can see I just grabbed the box and used that. Now if I was out in the field and I found a, you know, clearing of sunlight coming in between the trees and that kind of stuff, I would actually rope this panel up in between the trees and have it where it sat on an angle similar to what you're seeing here. You know, this even might be a little steep, but having it similar to what you're seeing here where it was more angled for the ideal position and that kind of stuff, yeah? But you know, for this we're just kind of doing rough examples to see, can I cook off my soup when I'm out in the field without having a battery involved, right? I know I can do tons of stuff once I've got a battery hooked up. I can go to inverters and store tons of power all I want under the sun and all that kind of stuff, right? But to me, the proof in the pudding is, what if those battery systems fail? If I have this kind of circuitry involved, am I still able to do things when I'm out in the field and not lose functionality? That to me is critical when you're talking about off-grid power production and that kind of stuff. You want to have redundant capacities within your systems. You know, it's not like when you're building systems in urban areas where it'll all be centralized. To have multiple small systems where if one fails, it's not the end of the world for you, is more ideal when you're off-grid, because failures happen. You know, these things go on, and the more you can have it where, oh, I can just swap out this part and put in another and I still get functionality, that can become invaluable if you had off-grid cabins or that kind of stuff, right? Instead of just completely going without because you relied on a centralized system. But like I say, I'll cut back. Oh, I didn't even check the time, I don't think, when I started the soup. But I'll cut back in about half an hour, 45 minutes, and show you, you know, the soup brought up to speed and that kind of stuff, yeah? All right, so it's 1:44. So I'm trying to do this all within an hour's time for you guys, just so you can see kind of the speed of performance. But I just want to stop and kind of stir this. You can see lots of steam and stuff on there. I'm starting to see some bubbling in the stew, so it's always a good sign. Just stir it up a bit, just because I want to rotate the heat throughout the pot, right? I haven't touched it since I first put it on, so this is just going to be the first stir, if you will. But I'm hoping to have this hot and ready. Yeah, it's already warm. I'm hoping to have this hot and ready by 2 o'clock, so I do it all within 1 hour's time. So as you can see, hopefully the camera's catching that right. It's 147.4 Fahrenheit, so 64 degrees Celsius already, right? So yeah, we're already 61.6 Celsius. So, you know, it's already getting to be hot enough where that would be a warm meal. It's not super hot, but it's not quite as hot as my coffee would be, but it's damn close, right? And if I give it another 15 minutes or so, it'll be piping hot. So like I say, and then I'll switch and I'll start to show you some other examples. But I just wanted to show you that, you know, when you're out in the field, you can do this without even having a battery involved, where I was able to cook off my coffee and make myself a hot meal with 1 hour of sunlight with no batteries involved, right? That to me was one of the key things I wanted to show. So I'll just stop and talk about this thing for a second too, this buck converter. So I got these off eBay and they're pretty cheap. They're like $20 units or so, but they take in, this is an input of 24 volts and an output of 12 volts at 20 amps max. But what I find with these units is they're actually fairly flexible. Sorry, just straightening out the wires. They're actually really flexible when it comes to the voltage I can stick into these. So, you know, this panel that we're running right now runs at a higher voltage. It's like 32 volts. And even though this is, you know, stepping down from 24 volts down to 12, it'll also step down that 32 volt down to 12, right? And it's good in that regard. And if I had a different panel that was at a lower voltage, say, you know, 19, 20 volts and in around that range, this would work with that just fine as well. So it's really good in that regard of you can have a wide range of solar panel voltages that you're feeding into these units and still have them cleanly convert out to the 12 volt, you know, as you'd want them to. And like I say, if you're interested in how I did all that, I do a detailed video on that on my channel in previous videos. If you look at battery-less systems, I talk about, you know, doing this kind of stuff, you know, in full detail. Yeah, and like I say, this video is mainly about the performance of this ALLPOWERS flexible solar panel, and to this point, it seems to be producing well. It's doing everything that I expected it to do, you know, for a panel this size and that kind of stuff. Yeah, so but pretty quick here, we'll kick back to that stew that we got there and see. We're getting closer to 2 o'clock, so I'll make that the next scene of how hot did it get, you know, to be able to do off my coffee and have that piping hot and be able to cook off a soup or stew, you know, a large can of it within 1 hour's time. Yeah, and see what the temperature is we get to. Okay, well, it's 1:57. Hopefully the camera's catching that, but it looks like it's bubbling so fierce. I'm just going to take it off the heat anyway, so I'll just detach that so that it's not connected any longer. And like I say, just fully unplugged it, yeah, and so there's no power going into it at this point. And I'll just kind of look at that now. Hopefully you can see the amount of steam coming off that and the condensation and all that kind of stuff. You can see there was lots of bubbles. There's still some bubbles happening in there, so lots of bubbles going on in there. I mean, this thing just looks piping hot. And to give you an idea, it's a warm day here. It's about 25-30 degrees Celsius, so I'm gonna ballpark somewhere around 75-85 degrees Fahrenheit. So, you know, it's not too bad of a day when it comes to the temperature, and you're still able to see that steam, or at least I am. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but yeah, and that's enough to scald the mouth out of me. So I'll just catch that on the temperature. So 77 degrees Celsius, 170 Fahrenheit, you know, and it's definitely a hot meal, right? And because it came out of the can, I'm not worried about it. But I was able to get that coffee done off and have this meal hot and ready in 1 hour's time. Like I say, if I remember it, earlier in the video, I started at 1 o'clock. It's now 1:59, you know, so within 1 hour's time, maybe a little less, you're able to have yourself hot meals, especially if you're dealing with canned foods and that kind of stuff. It's easy enough to feel safe, and you know you're not going to make yourself sick or any of that business. But you could see, hopefully the camera caught that, there was a good simmer going on in this pot. You know, if I wanted to let it sit for an extra half hour or hour, you know, on that kind of heat, if I was cooking stuff off the field, you know, or off the land out in the field, that kind of thing, you know, that I was worried, I would just let it run for longer. And because this thing's only using like 120 watts, you know, as long as there's sun shining on that solar panel, they can just keep cooking all day, right? But generally speaking, if I just had the panel and didn't have any batteries, and once I've cooked off my meal in the morning, if I know I'm getting good sunlight, I'll plug in my USB and start charging all my devices and stuff, and go off, do whatever I'm doing, and you know, out in the field. And when I come back, my devices are charged up and everything's ready to go. Then I can free that up and go back to cooking potentially a second meal in the day, right? Depending on how, you know, the location and how much sun I have and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to shift gears now, and I'm going to plug this in to a solar generator that I have. I've built out lots of these. I've shown details in previous videos, so you know, without getting into all the fine details of these builds, if you're interested in how do you do full complete solar generator builds, I've got videos of that up on my channel as well. Yeah, but like I say, I'll kind of shift camera angles and just get some of the wiring ready so that we can start to see how much power that solar panel is actually producing in readings and throwing it into a battery stack. Yeah. Okay, so I had to take the solar panel off the box and shift it over because, as you can see, there's shade from my tree here getting on my panels, so I can't have any of that business. So I'm just going to pop off this little buck converter that I've been using so far in the video. And you can see, really simple, just there's two little clips you squeeze together on the MC4 connectors. You just squeeze them together and pull and it just comes apart, yeah? So super simple in that regard. And I'll shift camera angles. I dragged out my solar generator here. I'll shift camera angles and show you that, of how that's wired up to the batteries and that kind of stuff, just give you kind of a surface level. And then we'll hook up the solar panel and we'll see what kind of power we're actually throwing into that stack of batteries, yeah? Okay, so this is one of my many solar generators I have kicking around my house. And I've got two 12 volt 100 ampere hour batteries in here. They're connected together in parallel, so positive to positive, negative to negative. And I've got wires that go off and connect to this little box here. These are solar charge controllers. So there's two different versions of these that exist. There's PWM and there's MPPT. So the PWM ones, the pulse width modulation, they're normally cheaper. You can get them for, you know, 20-30 bucks for smaller ones. They're not very they're not the most efficient on the world. You know, you get maybe about 70% efficiency, 80 at best if you're lucky. And the MPPT ones, they're more pricey, but you can get higher levels of efficiency. We're talking like 95-99% efficiency and that kind of thing. But I get these for when I'm out in the field, these little cheapy PWM ones. I get those for taking out in the field with me because, you know, if one of them ends up breaking or something, I'm only out 20 or 30 bucks, right? So this is kind of my box that I'd throw in the back of the truck and just, you know, use it to do things. But all it is, like I say, there's two wires, the positive and negative, go into this box, and then they come out, and they come out right here to more of the standard solar connections here, yeah? So I'll show you. You kind of squeeze together the clips, and these MC4 connections, you know, standard bulk. So I've just hooked on an extension cable here so I can reach off to that panel. So nothing fancy here. I just, you know, want to be able to run out to the solar panel with these. I'll have a little bit of loss through there, but nothing major. And I'll stop and just kind of show you, I'll switch camera angles and I'll just show you kind of some of the DC. This is primarily a box. Like I say, I do a lot of USB and I do a lot of secret lighter adapter stuff when I'm out in the field. I just find it's really efficient. So this box is kind of geared towards that style of build, yeah? So I've got a secret lighter adapter here that's already wired up to these batteries, so I can do as I have been throughout the example of the video, where I'm just going out to secret lighter adapter here. And I'll stop, shift camera angles, and show you kind of some of the other components that I have on this box, and then we'll shift back to seeing how much power that the solar panel is actually throwing into these batteries, yeah? So I also have it on the box where I've got AC like wall power out here and two USBs right here, and they just plug into a secret lighter adapter. So if I don't want to bring along an AC inverter, which I've shown in previous videos, they can be big and bulky, but I just want to have it where if I want to plug in an electric shaver or something, I can. I have this just strapped right onto the box, so I can easily just hook up my secret lighter adapter straight into this, and I'm right out to AC power, or I've got two USB plugs here. Secondarily to that, I've also turned around, I'll shift camera angles again and I'll come in and show you what's on here. So now just on the side of the box, and I've shown how I wire these things out in previous videos, so if you're wondering, you have any questions about it, you know, how did he build any of this stuff, I've got videos on my channel that show step by step how I do all of this. But there's a little switch here where I can switch it on, and then there's a voltmeter here, tells me I'm sitting at 13.2 volts, so this battery's pretty full right now already. And then I've got a couple USBs, they're both 2.1 amps here, and then I've got another cigarette lighter adapter that I can plug in right here, because when I'm out in the field, having two of the cigarette lighter adapters, like the one that I just showed earlier in the box and then the one that's here, allows me to plug in, you know, my hot coffee while I'm cooking off a pot of soup, or I can cook off two different pots of food at the same time and that kind of stuff. It just gives me flexibility. And if I wanted to have a lot of USBs running, I've got the 2 here and the 2 on that little inverter that I've got strapped to the side that I can plug into the cigarette lighter adapter. That allows me to, where I can charge, you know, 4 different devices all USB at the same time. And none of that's really a big draw on this battery, yeah? It's all pretty minimal. But that's enough talk about this box. I just know I didn't do a build video for this, so I didn't show out all in detail of exactly how I put this together. And when it comes to the solar charge controllers, I have 2 of them. I have one here and one here, so I can plug in more than one set of solar panels at the same time without getting any split connections, you know, Y connectors or any of that business. I can have them running independently of each other, all from the single crate, yeah? So this flexible 200 watt solar panel that I have, I could plug into one of these. And if you've watched previous videos, I've got lots of flexible solar panels, but I've got a folding solar panel that ALLPOWERS sent me as well that is a 100 watt unit, and I really like that panel. It's quite good. And I could plug that into here at the same time, and they could both throw charge independently into the batteries, and you know, without, you know, competing or conflicting with each other or any of that business. So that's really what this crate is all about. It's just for ease of throwing it in the back of the truck. It's powerful enough I can hook a microwave up to it through an inverter if I want. In the previous video I barbecued off some chicken. I can do all that kind of stuff. In fact, because I have the 2 batteries in the last video, I only had 1 battery that cooked off the chicken, that I could, you know, double my cooking time and that kind of stuff off this setup. And it's all on wheels, and it's, you know, a wheeled cart with handles and all that kind of happiness, right? So one way or the other, like I say, enough talking about this cart or crate. Let's get back to what the performance of these panels are. It's the heart of the video, right? So like I say, I've got the extension cable that goes off for the MC4 connectors, connects onto my solar generator. I'm just going to slide this out a bit so it sits in the sun fully. And that's the nice part. You can see how easily I just kind of toss that panel to the side. Makes it really elementary for moving things around and adjusting them if you're, you know, out in wooded conditions where you might have trees getting in the way and that kind of stuff. It's a lot nicer to have these kind of light panels than it is the big heavy glass ones. You know, they might last for longer term, but these ones are just a lot easier to handle, right? And just toss around and do things with. But needless to say, you can see there, I just plugged the MC4 connectors into each other, male to female, you know, really elementary, nothing to it. We'll go back now to the generator, then we'll look at how many amps and stuff that it's actually sticking into the battery bank. It might be a little limited because the batteries are pretty full, the voltage is already pretty high on those batteries, but we'll see, right? Okay, so I might have to come in closer for this, but I'm just looking at the screen here and it says 13.4 volts. I'm sitting at 5.1 amps. It's 15.8 kilowatt hours have already been stored into here, into this battery bank. So yeah, 13.5 volts sitting at, what was it again? How many amps? 13.4 volts sitting at 5.1 amps. So I'll just quickly pull up my calculator here. We'll see roughly what that's sticking in, or exactly what that's sticking in, I should say. So 13.4 times 5.1. So right now it's sticking about 68 watts worth of power into that, and that doesn't surprise me because, like I said, I know these batteries are pretty close to full. Normally I have them sitting on a little trickle charger if I'm not using them, so it kind of keeps the battery topped up. But I'll see if I can shift the camera angle and come in close just so there's no question. I'm not lying about the numbers or anything, but it is underperforming for the size of the panel. I would expect it to normally be closer to 150 to 170 watts of output power that was happening on that unit, but because the batteries are so full, we're going to see a little bit of a diminished in the production of the watts. Yeah, and I'm trying to do everything within my power to get you guys to see those numbers on the screen and stuff. It's just a really difficult angle to work at, but you'll see the voltage and you'll see the temperature in Celsius and the amps and that kind of stuff. I can't even see it myself, but hopefully the camera's just picking that all up. Unless you're staring kind of square at this thing, it's not the easiest to read. But yeah, hopefully that gives you an idea that I wasn't lying about my numbers or anything. Now, right now I've got it set up where, right now I've got it set up where this panel is just sitting flat, you know, out in the field. And like I say, ideally I would want to have that set up where it was, you know, aimed on a 45-degree angle to get kind of optimal power. So, but I'm not surprised by the fact that I'm only seeing about 70 watts going into this battery stack, just because, like I said, it was already pretty full to begin with. You know, this is kind of my backup and, you know, unit to use, if you will, just to take out into the woods, roughing it with me and that kind of thing. But hopefully that gives you an idea of kind of the performance of this solar panel and stuff. You know, generally speaking, you know, it's unfortunate that my battery just wasn't more dead than it is, or we'd see higher amperage going in, such as life. But generally speaking, you know, when it comes to this ALLPOWERS flexible panel, I'm pretty pleased with what I've seen so far. So I'll shift camera angles and I'll start to wrap this video up though, yeah? So like I say, there you have it, fellow YouTubers. So this is the ALLPOWERS SF200 solar panel. You know, to me, even though when we hooked it up to the battery, we saw the lower watts going into the battery, I know it's performing higher than that because I was successfully able to do off my water, because I was successfully able to cook off that food and, you know, get it up to a really high temps. That tells me that the watts are flowing through that unit. You know, that's where it's this is kind of what I allude to in other videos that I talk about. It's not always good to go off of the numbers you're seeing. Sometimes it's good to just, you know, real world, let's use it and see if it functionally is doing what I need it to do, right? You know, it's one of those things of you never know what the chemistry of the battery is and where it's sitting at and everything else. And then the solar charge controller and stuff, is that limiting the flow of power just to protect the battery and all that kind of stuff. Whereas when I do these real world tests of, will it cook off my coffee in 10 minutes? Yeah, okay, it's doing what I need to do. Will it cook off my food in a half hour? Yeah, okay, it's doing what I need to do. You know, that's like I say, it's one of the reasons why I don't just go by the specs I see out of the books. But all in all, I'm pretty pleased with this solar panel. I think for the price point, it's you know, cheap for what it is. If I'm not mistaken, it was about $300 roughly Canadian, you know, for flexible panels, for a 200 watt panel at that price point. To me, that's fantastic, really. You know, I've paid more money for less watts in the past when it comes to flexible panels, and you know, they had the PET coating on them. Like I say, this doesn't. This has the longer lasting coatings and stuff, so, you know, the quality of this seems, you know, good in my mind. There's nothing about this panel that I could see would be a significant issue in my mind if you were kind of on the fence about, you know, purchasing something like this. But if you enjoy this type of content, please like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching, yeah? Cheers.